The wind comes off the channel in gusts, carrying the smell of salt and something older. Concrete, damp stone, the slow rot of sandbags. A German soldier stands at his post in a coastal bunker somewhere above the beaches of Normandy. It is the hour before dawn on June 6, 1944. The sea below him is gray and restless. He has stood this watch 100 times. Nothing has ever happened. Then the sound begins. Not from any particular direction, from everywhere. A low, grinding roar that builds and builds until the concrete beneath his boots seems to vibrate with it. He turns north, he turns east, he turns west. And then the first gray light breaks along the horizon, and he sees it. The horizon is not visible. It is ships, 600 miles to the south, in a house in the town of Herlingen. The commander responsible for defending this coastline is asleep. On the road to Rennes, the division commanders charged with holding this sector are climbing into their staff cars for a war game exercise, a planning simulation of the German response to an Allied landing. At their assembly areas in the woods of northern France, 4 of the most powerful panzer divisions in the Wehrmacht sit idle, engines cold, waiting for permission that has not come. One German general does hear the Allied aircraft and turns his car around. He races back to his headquarters and pulls onto the grounds. He runs directly into American paratroopers. His name is General Wilhelm Felle, and he is the first German general to die in Normandy. He has been dead for an hour before most of his colleagues know the invasion has begun. Now, this is not the story of an Allied triumph. This is something darker, the story of how Germany lost the most consequential battle of the Western Front before the Allies had fired a single shot, and who broke the machine that might have stopped them. The answer begins months earlier. By late May, 58 German divisions were stretched across 2,000 miles of European coastline, from Norway to the Spanish border. On paper, that was formidable. On the ground, it was a different calculation. Many of those troops were Ostlegionen, conscripts drawn from Soviet prisoner camps, Turkestani and Mongolian soldiers equipped with captured weapons they had been given no time to master. German soldiers now averaged 6 years older than their Allied counterparts. The Atlantic Wall that Hitler had promised, 15,000 emplacements manned by 300,000 troops, existed mostly on maps. Shortages of concrete and labor had gutted the construction program. Only at the Pas de Calais was there anything approaching a continuous belt of defenses. Everywhere else, the wall was gaps held together by confidence. The weapon that could compensate for all of this was armor. 10 panzer divisions in France and the Low Countries, if they could reach the beaches in the first hours of a landing, before the Allies had men and vehicles enough ashore to build a real perimeter. They could do what infantry and concrete could not, push the landing back into the sea. Every senior German commander understood this. What they could not agree on was how to use it. Erwin Rommel was the most famous German officer of the war. The commander of Army Group B, responsible for the defense of the northern coast, he had made his reputation in the tank battles of North Africa, and he had drawn one hard lesson from that experience: Allied air power. In France, as in Libya, the sky belonged to the enemy. Any panzer force held in reserve would be pounded on its approach roads before it reached the front. The tanks had to be at the beaches before the landings came, deployed close enough to strike within the first hour, because after the first hour, they would not be able to move in daylight. Gerd von Rundstedt disagreed. Commander-in-Chief West, 68 years old, a Prussian aristocrat who privately called Hitler the Corporal, Rundstedt wanted a concentrated reserve, grouped centrally, ready to deliver a decisive blow once the actual landing location was confirmed. So he had seen what happened at Salerno, where naval gunfire had shattered German armored formations that pushed too close to the water. He was not going to commit his armor to a fixed beach line that Allied battleships could sweep clean. Both arguments had merit. Hitler resolved them with a compromise that satisfied neither man and broke both plans. Rommel received operational control of 3 panzer divisions, only one of which, the 21st Panzer, sat within immediate striking distance of Normandy. The 4 most powerful divisions, the 1st SS, the 12th SS Hitlerjugend, the 17th SS Panzer Grenadier, and Panzer Lehr, were placed in OKW Reserve, Wehrmacht Supreme Headquarters. They could not be moved by anyone without Hitler's express personal order. Germany had built a cage around its best weapon, and the question of June 6th was whether the key would arrive in time. There was another force at work on the German mind, one that had been building for months. The Germans knew the Allies were masters of deception. They had studied previous operations. They feared being fooled, and that fear, carefully cultivated, had been fashioned into a weapon. Operation Fortitude was not simply a collection of inflatable tanks and fictitious radio traffic. It was a psychological architecture, a constructed reality that told Germany's high command what it already suspected, that the real invasion would come at the Pas de Calais, the shortest crossing, the most logical route, the area directly covered by Germany's most powerful formation in the West, the 15th Army. FUSAG, the notional 1st United States Army Group, was a ghost, yet a radio signature and a name. Its nominal commander, George Patton, the one American general the German High Command genuinely respected. The 15th Army watched the Pas de Calais and waited. Into this architecture, a single agent fed the machine. Juan Pujol Garcia, codenamed Garbo, was a Spanish double agent operating for British intelligence. 62 of his fabricated reports had found their way into OKW intelligence summaries. His controllers trusted him absolutely. And on the morning of June 6, 1944, as Allied soldiers reached the beaches of Normandy, Garbo will send a message to his German handlers. That message is a time bomb, already ticking. It will land at OKW at the exact moment the German command structure most needs a reason not to act. The deeper irony was invisible to the men it trapped. The Germans feared Allied deception so profoundly that they had trained themselves to distrust their own eyes. The more they thought about being deceived, the more they deceived themselves. The evening of June 5, 1944 is quiet along the Normandy coast. The channel is running heavy, 4- and 5-foot swells, low cloud, visibility closing down. The forecast from German meteorologists is unambiguous. No invasion in these conditions. No amphibious operation can be mounted in this weather. At his headquarters near Saint-Germain-en-Laye, Gerd von Rundstedt reviews the forecast and goes to bed. At the Berghof above Berchtesgaden, Adolf Hitler takes his sleeping medication after an evening with Eva Braun. At his headquarters in Rennes, General Friedrich Dollmann confirms arrangements for the following morning's war game exercise. It is a quiet night in the German High Command. The storm has seen to that. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel packs a bag in the early afternoon. His wife Lucy turns 50 tomorrow, and he has brought her shoes from Paris. The weather is too bad for a landing. He has been pushing his headquarters hard for months. A day away will not matter. More than that, he plans to drive to Berchtesgaden the day after tomorrow to argue his case to Hitler directly. He wants more control over the panzer reserves, the 4 divisions locked behind OKW's wall. He believes that if he can sit across from Hitler and make the case clearly, something will change. He's going to argue for the panzers, while the panzers sit idle because he doesn't control them. He does not know this yet. In a chateau near Saint-Lô, one officer is not leaving. And General der Artillerie Erich Marx turns 53 tomorrow. It is the eve of his birthday. He walks on a wooden prosthetic leg, his left lost to a Soviet shell in 1941 during the opening weeks of Barbarossa. 2 of his 3 sons are dead on the Eastern Front. He could have remained in the reserves. His injuries would have justified it. He lobbied against his wife's wishes to return to frontline duty, and here he is. His officers describe him as a man of Spartan-like old Prussian simplicity. He wastes nothing, not food, not words, not time. Marx has believed for months that Normandy is the most likely landing site. He has said so up his chain of command. Nobody above him has agreed. He goes to sleep on the night of June 5th at his headquarters, with his maps and his telephone, waiting. So what the Germans cannot know, what no German meteorologist can see, having no weather stations in the North Atlantic, is that Allied forecaster group Captain James Stagg has detected a break in the storm. Starting at midnight, holding through June 6th. The window is there if you know where to look. Eisenhower knows. Nobody in Herrlingen knows. Nobody at the Berghof knows. Nobody driving to Rennes knows. The door has been left open. Nobody inside the house is watching it. Shortly after midnight, the paratroopers fall. The American 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions drop across the Cotentin Peninsula. The British 6th Airborne drops east of the Orne. Hundreds of dummy parachutists, some rigged with explosives to simulate ground fighting, scatter across the Normandy countryside. The phone lines cut by the French resistance are already silent. German commanders reach for phones that ring nowhere. The scale of the airborne operation. From the Cotentin to the Orne River, 50 miles of simultaneous drops, is the first signal. A feint does not look like this. Feints are small, precise, aimed at a point. This is everywhere at once. At his headquarters near Saint-Lô, Erich Marx is awake and on the telephone. He does not deliberate. He measures the arc of the reports and understands. This is the preamble to a seaborne landing. He alerts the 7th Army at Le Mans. 7th Army notifies Army Group B. The chain rises upward through the dark. At the Château de la Roche-Guyon on the Seine, the medieval headquarters of Army Group B. The phone begins ringing before 2 A.M. Rommel's chief of staff. So General Major Hans Speidel, who had retired just after 1 o'clock after hosting guests, takes the calls. The chateau's corridors hum with urgent footsteps. Outside, the Seine reflects a clearing sky. Rommel's chair at the command table is empty. At OB West headquarters in Saint-Germain-en-Laye, Rundstedt is awake before 3 o'clock. The reports are fragmentary, confused, alarming. He works through them with the methodical calm of a man who has been doing this for 50 years, and he reaches a conclusion quickly. Airborne operations on this scale cannot be a diversion. They are the prelude. Something very large is coming ashore before dawn. He contacts OKW and requests authority to move the Panzer reserves immediately toward Caen. OKW cannot agree without Hitler's approval. At approximately 3 a.m., Rundstedt acts without that approval, and he orders the 12th SS Panzer Division and Panzer Lehr to move immediately toward Caen. He makes the call that his formal authority does not quite cover, and he makes it correctly. The divisions stir in their assembly areas, engines turning over, commanders issuing orders, the first motion toward the coast. Above them, the skies thick with cloud, heavy overcast, the kind of ceiling that grounds Allied fighter bombers. The panzers could move now, in this darkness, under this cloud, and reach the battle area before first light. The window is open. The window is right now. At 7:30 a.m., General Alfred Jodl at OKW calls back. He informs Rundstedt that the 2 panzer divisions cannot be committed without Hitler's explicit order. Hitler has not given the order. Rundstedt must countermand his own instruction. The panzers stop. The cloud holds, and the window stays open, and no one walks through it. Whether Hitler was physically asleep at that moment or simply unreachable made no practical difference. No one at OKW was willing to commit the reserves without his personal approval. His adjutants hesitated, as historian Ian Kershaw has observed, to wake him with information that might prove mistaken. His staff understood what happened to men who brought the Führer wrong news. And so the machinery of the German High Command, at the most consequential moment of the entire Western campaign, stood perfectly still and waited for permission to save itself. When Hitler finally received the news, his response was a radiant smile. It's begun at last. He attended a reception for the Hungarian Prime Minister at Salzburg that afternoon. He was not a man in the grip of panic, but he was a man who had been perfectly deceived. Serene in the certainty that his Atlantic wall would hold, the panzers would counterattack, and the situation was manageable. The horror is not that he was irrational. The horror is what his confidence was built on. At OKW, Garbo's message had just arrived. Normandy was a feint, his trusted source reported. The real blow was still coming at Calais. Everything Hitler already believed was now confirmed by a voice he trusted. The panzers would wait. At 6:30 in the morning, the seaborne landings begin. On Gold, Juno, and Sword beaches, British and Canadian troops go ashore against opposition that is fierce in places and manageable in most. On Utah, American forces find lighter resistance than expected and push inland. At Omaha, on a strip of killing ground between high bluffs and open sand, the 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions bleed at a rate that makes the outcome genuinely uncertain for hours. Men drown in the surf. Men die before they reach the waterline. And still the beachhead holds. By mid-morning, troops and vehicles are accumulating on 5 beaches simultaneously. The beachhead is thin, shallow, desperately fragile. And it is hardening with every passing minute. Every minute without a panzer counterattack is a minute of irreversible Allied progress. In the assembly areas east of Caen, the panzer divisions sit beneath the trees, engines cold, the cloud above them unbroken. At 10 a.m., Hitler's refusal comes through OKW. The panzer reserves are not to be committed. The situation requires more information. 15 minutes later, at 10:15, a phone rings in Herrlingen. Erwin Rommel lifts the receiver and listens. So his chief of staff tells him what has happened. The landings, their scale, the panzer reserve still locked in their woods. Rommel hears that the divisions he spent months fighting to control, the tanks he insisted had to be near the beaches, have not moved. He had left France to argue for those very panzers the next morning. He cannot fly back. Allied aircraft own the sky he had said would be decisive. He sets down the phone, and he says, quietly, "How stupid of me." Not how stupid of Hitler. Not how stupid of OKW or of the command structure that had overruled him for months, or of the weather forecast that had sent him south. How stupid of me. It is Rommel's verdict on his own strategic argument, on the confidence that had emptied his headquarters, on the birthday trip, on the shoes from Paris, on the admission of a man who understood, in that single moment, exactly what the morning had cost and whose fault it was. He gets into a car and begins the long drive north. The panzer divisions wait in the woods east of Caen. Runners arrive with reports from the beaches. The numbers grow. The beachhead deepens, meter by meter, with each half hour that passes. In a car on the roads of southern France, the officer who designed the defense of these beaches watches village after village go by, unable to fly, unable to reach his headquarters by any faster means. The French countryside unreeling past the window at the speed of a staff car. He will not arrive until evening. At 2:30 p.m., Hitler's approval comes through. The panzer reserves are released. The morning overcast has broken up. Allied fighters and bombers range freely over every road in Normandy, hunting anything that moves. The panzers that could have advanced in darkness under cloud 8 hours ago, they emerge now into open daylight, and Allied aircraft find them within minutes. They crawl into roadside forests and wait for darkness before continuing. Panzer Lehr, when it eventually reaches the front, has already lost 85 armored vehicles and 123 trucks to air attack, before firing a single shot at an Allied soldier. The 4.5 hours between Hitler's refusal and his reversal are when the window closed, not on the beaches, not in a firefight, in a phone call that never came. There is one division available. The 21st Panzer has been fighting British airborne forces since before dawn. Its general absent at the start, like its units pulled in multiple directions by conflicting orders throughout the morning. Marx has spent hours fighting his way up the chain of command to redirect it. Rommel's permission was required to move it. Rommel was in a car in southern Germany. The messages went back and forth through Speidel at La Roche-Guyon. Hours passed. It is mid-afternoon when the 21st Panzer finally moves north toward Köln. Marx finds Colonel Hermann von Oppeln-Bronikowski, the officer leading the attack. The beachhead is hours old. The gap between the British and Canadian divisions is real, and the 21st Panzer is all Germany has. Marx looks at the man and says, "If you don't succeed in throwing the British into the sea, we shall have lost the war." The 21st Panzer drives north. It finds the gap between the British 3rd and Canadian 3rd divisions. Once it pushes through, elements of the division come within sight of the sea. For a moment, a genuine, vertiginous moment, it almost works. Then the British anti-tank gunners at Perrier-sur-le-Dent open fire, and then the sky changes. Hundreds of Allied gliders come in low over the advancing German armor. A second airborne wave, flying directly overhead, landing behind the Panzer line. The German commanders below watch them fill the sky and understand, without requiring further evidence, what it means. They are not simply stopped. They are flanked, cut off from behind by what is descending around them. The 21st Panzer Division withdraws. It has lost 70 of its 124 tanks. Germany's last realistic counterattack of June 6th ends not in a decisive tactical defeat, but in a German commander watching the sky fill with Allied aircraft, and understanding in that moment what the afternoon has meant and what the morning had already decided. By nightfall, 133,000 Allied troops are ashore. Casualties number 10,300. The landings cost more blood than any single day's fighting in any American campaign since the Civil War. But the beachhead holds across all 5 beaches. By June 30th, 850,000 men, 148,000 vehicles, 570,000 tons of supplies. The thing is built. It cannot be pulled down. Erich Marx died on June 12th, 6 days after his birthday. 6 days after the invasion he had spent months anticipating. He was on the road to Carentan, moving to oversee a counterattack, when an Allied aircraft found his car. Shrapnel struck him. He died the same day. The oak leaves to his Knight's Cross were awarded 12 days later. He was not there to receive them. He had been killed by Allied air power. The specific threat he had warned about for months, the threat that had made the Panzer reserves unmovable in daylight, the threat that had defined every hour of June 6th. He had been right about Normandy. He had been at his post. And then there is the 15th Army, Germany's most powerful formation in the West, positioned above the Pas de Calais, the force that never came to Normandy, never fired a shot at an Allied landing because it was waiting for George Patton's army to arrive. For 7 weeks after D-Day, it held its positions and watched the horizon for a blow that was not coming. Patton's army did not exist. It was a radio signature, a fictitious order of battle, 62 fabricated intelligence reports fed by a man in London into the war summaries of the German High Command. And the Ghost Army held a real army in place while real men died on real beaches. Even as the evidence mounted through June and into July, the 15th Army waited. The deception kept working long after the deception should have been obvious. It kept working because Germany had built a command culture that was afraid to trust what its own eyes could see. Von Rundstedt put his assessment in writing in the weeks that followed. He described Allied air power as controlling not just the beaches, but every road for 200 kilometers inland. Almost unlimited in radius. he wrote, attacking uninterruptedly to destroy the railway systems, the bridges, the supply columns. He wrote it without self-pity, without excuse. He was the man who had been awake before 3 a.m. on June 6th, who had ordered the right divisions to move at the right moment, and who had spent the rest of the day waiting for a phone call that came 4.5 hours too late. The window had been open for one morning. The overcast held while the panzers sat still, and by the time the key arrived, every road in Normandy was a killing ground and the beaches were already won. The key had been in the wrong hands, and by the time anyone understood what it unlocked, the door had already swung shut.